Hello, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for another topic of the week. First things first. Last week's topic didn't happen because I had to travel to teach last weekend. But it was a lot of fun. It was a 2-day class. Had a lot of great students. It was a packed house. And as I mentioned on the show, we were at Gamers Haven. We did our Night Titan painting class. It was really wonderful. I think everybody had a good time. I wanted to thank all the students for really being awesome and painting bravely and just all around having a good time. One of my main rules is have fun, and I think everybody really tried to do that. They didn't let anything scare them. They dove right in, feet first, and I love that. So if you're interested in checking out the schedule for me teaching, the link's down below. You can look at that. But for this week's topic, I want to talk about something we already talked about on the show last week, something we're going to talk about next week, and that is Skaven. We're going to talk about how the Skaven book. What do you think of it? What are your initial impressions? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is this making you drag your rats out? Is this making you want to get into the rats for the first time? One of the interesting observations I think I had on it is that's sort of an interesting carry-on from old editions. Is I have like two thoughts I didn't share on the show that they kind of formed in my mind as I was moving on, or like as I've been stewing on the book, as it were, even since then, over this week. The first one is that I'm really happy with it. I mean, I mentioned that kind of, but I mean, it's actually inspired me to want to play that army in a way, an army I really love. It was the first army I really fell in love with in Warhammer back in '98. It was the first army I went out of my way. It was the first unit I ever fully painted was a Skaven unit. And so it's kindled a lot of those early like discoverings in me, like when I first came to the army and first found it and really loved it. And I think that's pretty awesome that can happen. That you can, I'm sort of recovering something from when I was I think I was still a teenager at that point, I guess. Just barely, but yeah. And so I think that's pretty great. The second thing that occurs to me is that the Skaven were traditionally one of the worst armies for new players to start. So this was a common topic of discussion, like what army would you start with, right? If you're a new player coming in, what do you recommend people to start with? And back in 6th, 7th, 8th edition fantasy, it was never Skaven. Like, you never wanted to start with Skaven. They had complicated rules, complicated interactions, tons of figures to paint. Like, it was just a nightmare. And I think that's still true. Even now, as much as I love this army, I don't think I would ever recommend it to a brand new player. It's not a starter army. And that's actually evolved in the reasons since then. I think the rules are less wonky, although there are still some complicated interactions. Sigmar in general isn't as punishing on that kind of complexity level as say, like, Fantasy Battles was. But it's still in there, right? You've got to remember a lot of different sort of potential buffs, and do you overcharge or not, and that kind of stuff. A lot of units have sort of modalities they can work in. Do they work normal? Do you go for the risk reward? So there's stuff there. And players who don't really understand the risk reward measure will often make the wrong choice. And that can lead to a bad play experience overall. The other reason is because that line has aged, and losing the Island of Blood kits means that we actually had to revert back away from plastics on some things. Like, if you want warp fire throwers, you don't get the good plastic ones. You have to go back to the crappy metal ones, and so on and so forth. Same with the engineers, even though we had a good engineer kit. I mean, we've got the new engineer guy, but you got to go back to your old one now if you order the regular engineer. So it's actually quite a challenging army to create. A lot of the sculpts are old. A lot of the figures are expensive. Now, it is a great and rewarding thing for somebody who maybe it's their second, third, fourth army, because there's a lot of conversion opportunity in there. And so it gives you a chance to really personalize the army and make it your own. And that's a wonderful opportunity. once you're, more confident, you're in the game, you know what you're doing, that kind of thing. But if you were just starting out, it would not be my choice. So just something that occurred to me that Skaven continue to be not the starter army. Still massive amount of bodies in most builds. There are a few smaller count builds, but it's often still a large number of bodies, and now kits that are perhaps more difficult or challenging to really properly get a hold of. So I thought that was funny. But what are your thoughts? Drop them down in the comments below. Let me know what you think of the new Skaven book. We're going to continue our discussion of Skaven this next Wednesday. Very much looking forward to that. But as always, appreciate you watching this one, and we'll see you next time.